the right night to be at Elevate Carolina tonight. If you guys don't know, we're doing something that we have never, ever done before. So throughout the last couple semesters of Elevate, you guys have heard sermons from Pastor Taylor Scheidel. It's definitely a highlight. We've had video sermons from Pastor Stephen and other church staff members. We've also had our video sermon from Levi Lesko, which has been awesome. But in all of those weeks, you guys have never heard one of our very own leaders steward the content. So I'm so excited today to be introducing one of our co-presidents, our all-guys e-group leader, the guy that God gave the vision of Elevate Carolina to in the first place, and my very best friend, Chase Floyd. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Elevate. I am so excited to be here tonight. Are you excited? Make some noise. Man, you guys look so good tonight. You look so good. Tell your neighbor you look so good.
You look so
You
good.
look so good. Man. Well, I have been looking forward to this for such a long time. And let me tell you why I've been looking forward to it. Because this right here is the dream. This is a dream. This is a dream that God deposited in my spirit way back when, in last fall, when Elevate hadn't even started yet, when Elevate hadn't even opened its doors yet. God, this has been something that God's been pushing me towards. This has been something that God's been calling me to ever since then. And tonight, that dream is finally coming to life. I couldn't be more excited. I couldn't be more thankful. And so let's just give one more shout of praise for getting in the door tonight. I am so excited. Cool. Well, if you don't know me, you probably don't know that I'm one of the clumsiest, one of the most accident-prone people you will ever meet. I mean, my life has been full of mistakes. I'll probably trip up here before the night's over. My life has been full of mistakes. And so since I've got you guys locked into your seats. Please stay in your seats. Keep your seatbelt fastened until the sermon is over. Since I've got you guys to myself for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be real with you guys. I'm going to be vulnerable with you guys by sharing my most embarrassing story ever. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes.
Cool. I was hoping you said that. It might mess up my sermon if you said no. But so let me set the scene. I'm back in 6th grade at Chapin Middle School. A couple of you guys were there with me. Shout out Sierra Clout. So I'm in 6th grade, and I'm weighing in at about the same weight I am now, just, a little bit on the shorter side. And so it was distributed a little different. But man, Chubby Chase was super into student council in middle school. And so one day, my assistant principal came up to me, and he goes, "Chase, how would you like to be the Chapin Eagle mascot at our season opener basketball game?" And without blinking an eye, guys, and my southern accent, my high-pitched voice that hadn't hit puberty yet, I said yes, and I was so jacked up to be the mascot for our basketball game. And so, fast forward to a couple of days, and I'm walking into this gym, and man, I'm walking in confidence, I'm walking in pep, I'm walking in hype. Not much has changed in that regard, but I go in the locker room, and I start putting this mascot costume on. I start with the head, and if you don't know, if you weren't a mascot in a past life, the mascot heads are usually a football helmet. So I put this football helmet on, and there's this kind of white thing kind of dangling in front of my mouth. I don't really know what to do with it. I just kind of leave it there. So I put the helmet on, I zip up the jumpsuit, and I put on the eagle claws, the shoes. And man, these things were some of the comfiest slippers you will ever put on, but they were also some of the biggest shoes I've ever worn. These things were like clown shoes. They took my shoe size from a 7 to a 27, just like that. So I put on all my stuff, and I walk out to the start of the tunnel. And I'm standing there, and I'm jacked up. I'm like 5'5", but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go fight a war right here. And I'm standing there, and I'm waiting for my assistant principal to give me the go-ahead to call me out of the tunnel. And I'm waiting there, and finally he gives me the, "Here comes your Chapin Eagle," and man, I sprint out of that tunnel. I mean, I'm like hauling butt, I'm sprinting, my legs have never moved that fast in my life. And I'm running, and all of a sudden one of my claws catches the other one because my feet are really big, and I start to tumble, and I start to lose my balance, and then I just go face down right on the basketball court in front of the entire crowd in front of both teams, in front of all the parents, in front of all the kids. And to make matters worse, if that wasn't embarrassing enough, that little white thing, you guys remember the thing that was in front of my mouth? Well, turns out that thing was a chin strap. And I don't know if you guys know about chin straps, but they're not very effective if they're not under your chin. And so when I hit the ground, this head came off with me. And that thing rumbled and tumbled its way all the way to half court. And so here I am, this short little chubby middle schooler, decapitated Chapin Eagle, laying smack dab right in front of, coincidentally enough, all the cheerleaders, because, God's got a sense of humor. He's going to let me fall right in front of all the girls I had a crush on back in 6th grade. And so I'm laying there. The crowd is stone cold silent, and they're looking at me, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Of course, I don't know what my next move is. Lay there, play it off, look cool. I don't know. And so I'm just laying there, petrified. And then the worst part was having to wake up and go to school the next day, because I knew that word had gotten around so quick about what had happened the night before. And I was just so scared to go to school because I just kept replaying the mistake from the night before in my head. I should have practiced running in my eagle claws. I should have put the chin strap under my chin. And so I just kept thinking about all of my mistakes, and I was so embarrassed to go to school. And while that might be like a funny story to look back at and laugh now, not all of our mistakes are as funny. Not all of our mistakes make us want to laugh. Some of our mistakes make us want to cry ourselves to sleep at night. Some of our mistakes make us get in a cycle of self-blame where we lash out at everybody who tries to help us, everybody who's close to us. Some of our mistakes make us push it way down in our gut so that it never has to see the light of day, and so that these feelings of depression, these feelings of anxiety, they start to build up, they start to pile up, until eventually we just can't take it anymore. Not all of our mistakes are funny. And so tonight, I want to talk about mistakes and grace through the life of David. Y'all know my boy David. I know y'all know my boy David. David is one of the most famous characters in the entire Bible. He's the little boy shepherd that God chose and anointed at an early age, and he's the prepubescent, adolescent teenager, hormones raging, that go out on the battlefield and brings down one of the biggest giants in all the land with nothing more than a slingshot and a stone. I know you guys know David. And then after that, God kept blessing him. He kept having success, and eventually he became the king of Israel. David is famous, but the problem is a lot of times when we talk about David, we only talk about all the good he did. We only talk about all the success he had. It says later in the Bible that David was a man after God's own heart. So we talk about how good of a Christian he was, how well he led his people, how he shepherded them closer to God. But what we don't talk about is the other side. The other side. And that's my title for tonight's message, is the other side. And so tonight, I want to talk about the other side of David. The other side when maybe he wasn't so perfect, when he wasn't God's little angel, when David screwed up. And so I'm going to be reading from 2 Samuel chapter 11, and it reads like this. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. How many of you guys know that our mistakes are often start when no one else is around? Yeah. When we're left by ourselves, when we're left to our own devices, when we're left to our own temptations, when there's no one else to hold us accountable.
Yeah, come on, Chase.
Make some noise for that one. Come on, I know y'all know it's true.
Yeah.
Because I know when I'm left by myself, there's no telling what I'm going to get into. And that's the same thing with David. And it says one evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. That's kind of creepy. Let's keep reading. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to her. She came to him, and he slept with her. He slept with her. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. David, you are the baby daddy. So David sent this word to Joab. He said, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. In other words, David tried to small talk the dude. David brought the husband home from war and then warmed up to him as, hey man, how's it going out there on the battlefield? I hope the weather's good. While you're gone defending our country, I definitely didn't sleep with your wife or anything. Definitely didn't happen. And so David tries to small talk Uriah. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. Here's David's plan to cover up his mistake. You ready? David wanted Uriah to go to his house because he hadn't seen Bathsheba in a very long time. He wanted Uriah to go home so that the two could do what married couples do. And then when Bathsheba popped up pregnant the next day, when her belly got big around, Uriah would think that it was his kid. But David was told Uriah did not go home. And so he asked Uriah, bro, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Don't you miss your wife? And Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I then go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Y'all, Uriah is a really good dude. Uriah says, as long as my homies are out there on the battlefront fighting this war, there's no way I'm going to go home to sleep in my own bed, to get a home-cooked meal, and to have sex with my wife. That ain't happening. That ain't it, chief. And so, where am I at? Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. Here's plan number 2. Plan number 1 failed. He thinks if he gets Uriah drunk, then Uriah for all his morals will go out the window, and he'll go home and have drunken sex with Bathsheba. But here's the kicker. It says, but in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. Option number 2, put an X on it. It's take it out of the oven. It's done. So, David's like, well, I'm about out of options. Here we go. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah out in front where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him so that he will be struck down and die. He'll be struck down and die. Option number 3 is kill Uriah. If he kills Uriah, Uriah will never know that David got his wife pregnant. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah in a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. So Uriah's dead. Uriah's in the ground. David succeeded in getting Uriah to die. David succeeded in covering up his mistake. So I'm going to skip the next couple of passages. All it is Joab communicating Uriah's death to a messenger, and the messenger filling in David because they didn't have text messaging back then, so it had to take a little while for news to travel. And so, skipping ahead, it says, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife, and for him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. If you don't get one thing out of that entire story, get this. David screwed up big time. I mean, David really screwed the pooch, y'all. David not only slept with another man's wife, then he tried to cover it up. He tried to cover up the fact that he got her pregnant. And then when all that failed, David said, I'm just going to kill the man. David really messed up here. This is a big mistake. This is a big mistake. And keep in mind that David is not someone who's new in his faith. David is not a non-believer. David, this is someone who has walked his entire life with God. I don't think y'all get it. This is someone this is out of left field for David. This is out of the blue for David. This is unexpected. This is unnatural. This is out of David's character. This is not who David is. This is not who David is. And what I noticed is that at the end, it doesn't seem like David had any consequences for his actions. Right? Did y'all pick up on that?
Yeah.
Make some noise. Talk to me. Yeah, it says like Uriah's dead, right? David's still in power. David's still king. And moreover, he married the girl and she gave him a son. It seems like everything's going win, win, win for David. It seems like everything's just going David's way on this day, even though he was the one who made the mistake. But the problem is that the story doesn't stop there. The story continues on into the next chapter. And so along comes Nathan. And Nathan is the man. Nathan is a prophet sent by the Lord. He's kind of like the Lord's middleman for communicating his messages back then, because we didn't have the Holy Spirit. And so Nathan is like that little angel sitting on David's shoulder telling him when he screwed up. And so along comes Nathan, and here we go. Nathan says to David, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and Judah. And if all that had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why then did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes?" In other words, Nathan asked David, God gave you all of that. How could you screw up? You screwed up. Think about it this way. The devil doesn't mess with you when you have nothing to lose. The devil only tries to get you to mess up when you have something to lose. Think about it this way. If I'm a quarterback and I throw an interception, any South Carolina quarterback will fit for this example. So if I'm a quarterback and I'm on the field and I throw an interception and the defender picks it off and he keeps running the way I was throwing it, the way towards my end zone, then I'm not going to try and stop him. I'm not going to try and bring him down because I have nothing to lose. But let's say that defender picks it off and runs the opposite way, runs the way he's supposed to be running, runs towards me, then you best believe I'm going to try with all my might to bring him down. I've got 6 points to lose. I've got a touchdown I could give up. And that's how it is with Satan. He doesn't attack you. He doesn't get in your head. He doesn't try to get you messed up when you had nothing to lose. And David had a lot to lose.
Come on.
Nathan told David, the Lord has made you king of Israel and delivered you from the hands of Saul. David had a lot to lose. David had a lot going for him. And what happened to David is he took all that for granted.
Wow.
David was literally standing on top of God's provision in the form of a palace when he couldn't look. He couldn't take a second to look at all that God had done for him, all that God had given him. He had his eyes focused on the one thing he couldn't have.
Wow.
That's the only thing he could think of was the one thing that God didn't give him. He had all these wives, but he could only look at someone else's wives. Because one of Satan's greatest tactics to make you mess up is to make you forget all that you have so that you get greedy.
Wow.
So that you forget what you have, so you start focusing on what you don't have. That's what happened with David. And so Nathan, let's give a quick shout of praise for Nathan. Who knows that God will send you just the right person at just the right time? That's who it is for Nathan. That's what it says for Nathan. The Lord sent Nathan to David. And furthermore, Nathan didn't butter him up. Nathan gave it the man straight. Nathan didn't serve it on a silver platter or try and be like, David, I think you might have messed up here. David told him, bro, you really screwed up here. And that convicted David. David saw the error of his ways. David saw how he messed up. And so after Nathan says all of that, it says, David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. I have sinned against the Lord. David took ownership of what he had done, and he acknowledged his mistake. And in return, Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. Even after all of that, there was forgiveness. There was forgiveness. Even after all of that, after all that disrespect, after how little you treated me, how little you respected me, after all that contempt, there was forgiveness.
Good chase.
Now, I want to say that doesn't mean that you won't have to face your consequences. Don't think I forgot about what I said a few minutes ago. David still had to face the consequences of what he had done. Nathan lays out 3 very clear consequences that David will have to go through. Y'all, God is a good, good father, but part of being a dad is disciplining your kids when they step out of line.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good chase.
I'm going to say that one more time. God is a good father, but part of being a dad is disciplining your kids when they step out of line. That's what God did to David. But the beautiful thing about grace is that it says, I still love you. I still choose you. I still want you. Even through all that, you are still mine. You are still mine. And the cool thing about God's form of punishment is that it's not meant to tear you down. It's not meant to embarrass you. It's meant to build you up. It's meant to develop you. And let me prove it to you. It says later on in that passage, it says, she being Bathsheba, okay, let me back it up a little bit. Bathsheba's first kid with David died. That was one of the 3 consequences that Nathan laid out for David. But this is later on. It says, she gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him. Y'all, from the worst of your mistakes, God can produce your biggest blessing. There's a reason Nathan said, you will not die. It's because God wasn't done with David yet. And I have a feeling that someone needs to hear that God's not done with you yet. There's a reason you're still standing. There's a reason you're still kicking. There's a reason you made it here tonight. God's not done with you yet. Give him a shout of praise if you've got thankful he's not done with you yet. Solomon wouldn't have been born if it wasn't for David's mistake. If it wasn't for David's mistake. Now, I'm pretty sure that no one in this room has messed up quite as bad as David. You might have screwed up pretty bad. I know I screwed up pretty bad. But here's why I say that. Because if you would have done the things that David did, the odds are you wouldn't be here with us tonight. You'd be behind bars in today's time. So I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that no matter how big your biggest mistake is, it probably isn't as big as David. Here's what I want to say. Not all of David's mistakes were big and bad. Not all of them were intimidating. Have you guys, this is a little active learning activity. Have you ever talked about someone behind their back?
Yeah.
Have you ever treated your parents with less of the respect than they deserve?
Yeah.
Have you ever let what other people said about you, other people's opinions about you, influence what God said about you?
Yeah.
Have you ever drawn your affirmation, your validation from your grades, your finances, what's going on around you, rather than the Word, what He promises you?
Yeah.
Who's guilty of the small things? Put your hand up in the air. Make me feel better about myself, because I know I am. And David was too. Fast forwarding a couple decades into David's reign as king, it says Satan convinced David to take a census of all the people of Israel. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, because we take censuses all the time. We've got one coming up next year. But make sure you participate. But back in the day, a census was a way of quantifying how powerful a king was. Because the higher the census count, the stronger the army, which meant the more powerful the king.
Wow.
Here's why that's a big deal. Because God had promised David that he would multiply his army 100 times over. 100 times, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. God promised David, he said, homie, you don't need to count the people. You don't need to do the census. I promise I will multiply what you have. But David ignored the promise.
Wow.
I know that I'm not the only one who has ever ignored a promise of God in favor of what was in front of me with my eyes.
Yeah.
David believed what he saw rather than what he knew to be true.
Good take.
And it says that David's lack of trust displeased God. And to be honest with you guys, I don't blame God for being displeased. Put yourself in the feet of the big man. How would you feel if you promised someone to walk in authority, to walk in confidence, to walk in strength, to walk in power, to walk in might, and they didn't just turn their back on you, they were in the other way to someone else to try and get what you had promised them?
Wow.
Have you ever poured into someone, put your heart into someone, and they turned the other way and ran and tried to get what you promised them from someone else?
Yeah.
That's how God felt. I don't blame him for being displeased with David. And it says David knew what he did was wrong. It says David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. Guilt caught up to David just like it catches up to all of us. But here's the kicker. This time, because David had messed up before, because David had misstepped before, because David had screwed up before, this time he knew what to do with it. This time, he knew that he had to take ownership of his mistake and ask for forgiveness. It says, and this is immediate. Before with Bathsheba, it took Nathan to get to him. This time, it says David was conscience-stricken. And he said, I have sinned greatly in what I've done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. David knew what to do this time. But, just like before, God didn't just make the consequences of David's actions disappear. This time, he sent a plague upon Israel that killed 70,000 people. How would you feel if you were David knowing that your mistake cost 70,000 people their lives?
Wow.
I would be beside myself. I wouldn't know what to do with my guilt. I cost people their husband, their father, their wife, their mother, their son, their daughter. That was because of my mistake. And that's where David's at. David doesn't know what to do. But from his darkest moment, from the moment he was most disappointed in himself, from the time when he literally, it says in the word, he fell down on the ground in distress, an angel of the Lord came down and met him.
Wow.
An angel of the Lord came down and met him. And the angel said, go up on the side of that mountain and build an altar on the threshing floor of Arana, the Jebusite. And that's what David did. David went up on that mountain and bought that piece of land and built an altar. And from that place of obedience, from that place of sacrifice, from that place of guilt, from that place of, I'm sorry, God, I don't know what I did, I don't know how I screwed up, I don't know how I got myself into this, but here I am. Or from that place of, I messed up before, I don't know if this time is going to be any different, but I'm going to try, God, here I am, use me. God was waiting.
Good chase.
It says the Lord answered David's prayer by removing the plague from Israel.
Wow.
Y'all, when we make mistakes, it's a dark place. It's a really dark place. And the dark is dangerous because the dark is where the enemy likes to operate. It's in the dark that he can whisper these lies of disappointment, of disqualification. He can make you think that God can't use you anymore. But if you don't get one thing from today's sermon, get this. Your mistakes don't disqualify you from God's grace. They make you more qualified for it. They make you more qualified for it. Grace wouldn't exist if there weren't people who needed the grace. God said, I love you in spite of your sin, not because you're absolved from it.
Wow.
God isn't mad at you. He's waiting on you. He's waiting on you on the other side of your repentance.
Good.
Because for us to be able to tap into God's endless supply of grace, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge our mistake and ask Him for forgiveness and run to Him for forgiveness, because God's waiting for us, but that's a stationary action. We're the ones who have to do the running. Y'all remember Bathsheba?
Yeah.
I need more of that. I know more of y'all remember Bathsheba. Come on, talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so after David's affair with Bathsheba, David wrote this. He said, then I acknowledge my sin to you, and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Even after all that, there was forgiveness.
Wow.
But David had to take the first step. God was waiting once he got there, but David was the one who had to do the running. But once he did, God was waiting on the other side.
Wow. Good.
Whenever you think that you're done with yourself, I can promise you that God's not even close to done with you, because nothing you can do can screw up God's plan for your life.
Yeah. Come on, okay.
Nothing you can do can screw it up. And let me prove it to you. Before any of this happened, before David had sex with Bathsheba, before David took the census, before any of it, David wanted to build a temple. Sounds like a pretty good thing to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good thing to do, right? Here's the problem. Here's the catch. God said no. God said no. Why would he say no to a temple being built in his name? Because it wasn't part of the plan. God told David that you will have a son, and he will be the one to build the temple, and his name will be Solomon.
Yeah.
Solomon? You mean the broken love child of David and Bathsheba?
Wow.
You mean the fruit of David's biggest mistake? You want him, God? You want him to be the one to build your temple? You want him to be the one to perform your plan? And God said, yes, I want him.
Yeah.
God said, I want him. And y'all, God spoke this prophecy before Solomon was even born, before David had even laid eyes on Bathsheba. Because God knew the entire time that David would screw up, and yet he still said, I choose you.
Wow. Good.
I choose you, David, to be the father of the one who will build my temple, to be the father of the next king of Israel. I choose you. I love you. I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and he loves me, and I love you. He loves you. And get this. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah.
Still with me? Because this is important. Not only that, the plot of land that David built the altar on after the census would be the same plot of land that Solomon would use to build the temple, and would be the same place where Jesus Christ would come down from the heavens to die as a man on the cross for our sins. David didn't have Jesus Christ to lay his sins at the feet of, but we do.
Wow. Good.
Thanks to David. The after effect of David's mistake would become the birthplace of God's grace. Wow. Stand up on your feet, I'm closing. Your mistakes don't disqualify you from God's grace. He still loves you. He still wants you. He still treasures you. He isn't mad at you. He's waiting on you. He's waiting on you on the other side. God isn't done with you yet. The miracle is on the other side of your mistake, because he who began a good work in you will be